Hafa, I'm Amanda Dedicatoria from the Pacific News Center, and we're here with Dr. Robert Underwood for Coffee with the Candidates. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Underwood. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and it's an honor and a pleasure to be with you, Amanda.
Well, it's great to have you. So I know that you've mentioned in the past that the island's congressional delegate should be able to pursue a Guam agenda and intimately know the Guam story while in Washington, D.C. Could you tell me what that means and what that entails?
What it means is that the people of Guam should be unified here and fight like heck in Washington, D.C. And I believe that the current delegate spends a lot of his effort in having some kind of contest, sometimes political, with fellow elected leaders. It's not clear that he's reaching all of the constituents. I think that it's the responsibility of Guam's delegate to Congress to make sure that there is a unified Guam agenda. Of course, we're not going to agree on everything, but there's a unified Guam agenda, and that's how you build force and support and strength for the struggle in Washington, D.C. It's not easy to get things done in Washington, D.C., and it becomes a lot harder when you're divided at home.
Mm-hmm. And if elected, what are 3 issues that you'll push for and why?
Well, the number one issue is, of course, to rebuild the economy. And I think we can rebuild the economy by having active participation with the military, making sure that we introduce ideas into set-asides for contracts and engineering firms, and then also ensuring that contractors pay local taxes, and trying to build a jobs program. We have 30,000 people unemployed right now. Try to build a jobs program with the military so we don't have to rely on foreign labor. We also have to work on our healthcare system. I think that there's going to be great opportunities in Washington, D.C. next year when the national scene will change dramatically, not only for economic policy, but for healthcare policy, but also, lastly, of course, education. And, God gave us one instrument right here to use, but we need technical instruments as well. So I believe that it is our responsibility to allow our young people to maximize their God-given talents while utilizing instruments that we should provide them.
Mm-hmm. Of course, and you served 5 terms in Congress. You served for 10 years, and it's been about 17 years since your last term. What would you say that you've learned over those years?
I think while I was president of the University of Guam, I think young people taught me a lot. I like to say that as I handed out 7,000 diplomas, I got 7,000 educations as well. They taught me that young people today want to be entrepreneurs. They want to engage in the knowledge economy. They want to use technology and the knowledge economy in fields like agriculture and health sciences, biosciences, investigation of the coral reefs, the environment. Our young people today know how to use technology, and we should set that loose. We should facilitate that through federal partnerships that allow our young entrepreneurs to create new high-tech jobs so that they want to stay in Guam. I believe that that is really possible in partnership with research institutions, of course, like the University of Guam, but in partnership with federal agencies and allowing us to work with many of the available high-tech resources that we have in this part of the world.
Mm-hmm. Of course. And so what is your stance on governmental transparency and accountability?
A very strong one. Sad to say that I believe the current delegate is hiding behind his attorneys. He doesn't answer questions about the allegations that have been lodged against him, and he refuses to be transparent about it. He tells us he's working on things, but he never provides any evidence. He provides us with Facebook postings. Every letter I write as a member of Congress will be posted. Every meeting I attend will be posted. I did this in the past. I used to release my schedule to the public. That's transparency. I would release my schedule to the public. Everybody knew what I was doing. Everybody knew who I was meeting with. Everybody knew what committees I attended. Everybody knew when I had the chance to vote that I went to the floor and vote. that's the real issue about transparency. It's not just, well, I'm not doing anything wrong and I'm denying it. It's also allowing people to peek into the day-to-day work of a member of Congress. We only have one voice in Congress, and that voice has to be loud and clear and transparent on our behalf.
Mm-hmm. And in line with that, if you're elected, you'll be spending a considerable amount of time away from home, serving the people of Guam. Why do you think it's important to have direct community engagement?
Because you have to be home to feel the pain of your people. Mike St. Nicholas hasn't been home since February. Delegate Kilili Sablan has been home 4 times to the Northern Marianas and still be active in legislation. People used to ask me when I was delegate, how much time do you spend in Washington? How much time do you spend in Guam? I said, well, I roughly spend about 3 months in Guam, 8 months in Washington, and 1 month inside an airplane. And that's the nature of the job. You're supposed to be going back and forth. You're supposed to be reaching out. You're supposed to be holding town hall meetings. I had 77 village meetings when I was delegate from Guam to Washington, D.C. That's almost 8 village meetings a year because I felt it was my responsibility. And those meetings consisted of people lining up and asking me any question they had, raising any issue they wanted. And that's the way you open yourself up. That's the way you're transparent. And that's the way you're supposed to communicate with people.
Mm-hmm. And how did you feel like by having these village meetings, how did they kind of affect the initiatives and the issues that you pushed for?
Well, they gave me insights into what people were really feeling. They provided the depth of emotion. It gave the real life grounding to what are the problems and issues that people are experiencing at the village level. You know, just because you're a hot shot in Washington, D.C. doesn't mean that a village pothole is not an issue. Doesn't mean that trash pickup is not an issue. It doesn't mean that you can't try to find a federal connection to every single issue and problem that people face, because it's there, and we can utilize that to our advantage.
Mm-hmm. And could you give me some examples of some federal connections that that you kind of helped by having these village meetings?
Of course, you know, I think the main issue that in my early village meetings was about land. So in my first term in Congress, I had not only village meetings, I had a land conference. Out of that land conference, we were able to pass legislation that returned 3,500 acres, 3,400 acres of land to the government of Guam, eventually to original landowners, over $1 billion of land, value of land. Then the problems continued. So people kept telling me about slowdowns and issues pertaining to the transfer of land and the transfer of future land. So I passed other legislation, again, giving the people of Guam the right of first refusal on any excess federal land. We're the only jurisdiction that has that. Anytime the federal government releases land anywhere else in the U.S., it goes first to another agency. Here in Guam, if a federal agency says they no longer need land, they have to ask the government of Guam, what do you want? Do you want it or not? That's because of that legislation. Of course, there were many other things ranging from betel nut. We were able to get betel nut into the customs zone. We were able to get FDA to relent as long as the betel nut was peeled. And so we were able to do many of those things because people came and they expressed themselves. And so we had issues pertaining to the National Guard. We were the first ones. My legislation allowed the National Guard to get commissary privileges during a federal disaster. And then later on, I pushed, along with a couple of other members in armed services, so that the Guam Army National Guard, the Guam Air Guard, the U.S. Army Reserve Unit here, have full-time commissary privileges. That was possible because I worked at it, and I was in armed services, and I heard people complain about it.
Wow. That's so, you know, the betel nut thing, that's so regionally specific.
That's right, that's right. And you know, we were getting ready to pass that legislation in the Senate, and the FDA got nervous, so they said, okay, we'll lift the ban, so that they didn't want the example of legislation actually forcing them to change one of their policies. So we're very, very happy with that. But you know, you learn a lot just by talking to people, and you learn about their issues and what is of importance to them. And sometimes it could be anything as simple as how do you bring back body remains from overseas, to beetle nut, to land return, which is very complex, of course, to working on constituent issues, immigration issues. I point out that the first time Manny Pacquiao ever boxed outside of the Philippines, I was the one who helped him get a visa. That was many, many years, of course, because I think they were having an exhibition match up at the University of Guam. So those are things that a member of Congress can do if they have an efficient office and they have the interest of doing so. Mm-hmm. And how many people I put through the military academies? In dozens of people. I don't know of anybody who's been even appointed to a military academy by Delegate San Nicolas. These are things that you have to pay attention to. People come to you with their problems and their issues, and you pay attention.
Mm-hmm. And this will be my last question. You know, taking into account your decade of experience serving as a Congress member, how does that make you different from the other candidates?
Well, experience counts. You know, so I'm not going to use their youth and inexperience against them. But of course, experience counts. You know, as time goes by, you kind of understand how to triangulate some issues, how you try to keep issues alive. And believe me, I know a lot of people in Washington, D.C. I still do.
Oh, that is awesome. So thank you so much for your time, Dr.
Thank
Underwood.
you.
We
Thank
learned
you
a
so
lot
much.
about beetle nuts today.
Yeah, who knew?
Yeah. And that's all for this segment of Coffee with the Candidates. Thank you so much for your time, and tune in next time.